Here's a sneak peek from today's episode.
I think that's really the biggest shift in understanding ABM is that it's not a lead generation tool. It's purely an influencer. And then once you do that and you realize, okay, I need to measure different KPIs against this for success, and not necessarily the conversion rate, cost of your CPL and everything along those lines.
Welcome to the Content Amplified podcast, brought to you by Masset. Our goal is to help you get more from your marketing content. Each episode is a 10 to 15 minute interview with industry experts that share amazing insights to help you squeeze as much juice from your content as you possibly can. Here's today's interview.
Welcome back to another episode of Content Amplified. Today I'm joined by Chris. Chris, welcome to the show.
Hi, Ben. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, Chris, I'm excited for this. I feel like I have a lot to learn today. I'm excited to dive into the subject, but before we do that, we'd like to ask our guests, what do you love about content and marketing, and kind of catch us up on your career a little bit?
Sure. So marketing is one of those things where I don't like to use the passion descriptor when everybody says like, oh, it's my passion. But, actually I'm one of those weirdos that have a degree in marketing. I went to school for marketing. I knew I didn't want to go into sales because it was funny when everybody was graduating from Washington State University with our degree in marketing, half of them went into sales, which I thought, okay. I mean, I thought that was an easy way to kind of pivot in a career. And I actually thought I took the harder way because I was actually having to work in my degree. From a content perspective, I always thought that how amazing is it that you're creating things that are meant for different audiences, and it's across many different mediums. So it made it to where you didn't get bored doing one thing or the other. You could, you've got a whole toolbox, and it's like, oh, well, today I want to work with my hammer. This day I want to work with my planer, so on and so forth. And so, I thought it was great to be able to find out who your ICP is and then create these different pieces of content that support their lives day to day. At least that's my philosophy with my team is, you got to create content that it helps your ICP, helps your prospects and your customers. Who I am, like I was saying, Chris Collier, I'm VP of marketing for EHS Insight. Been spending about 15, 16 years in the EHS industry, degree in marketing, minor in sociology. Two reasons why I got the minor was, one, I needed to raise my grades to certify in the business school at Washington State. But then also I thought, well, if I'm going to do it, because I was close to getting a film minor, probably do something that's going to amplify my major in marketing. So sociology is studying a group of people, marketing, you're selling to a group of people. I've spent about 18 months in cybersecurity, but then was brought back into EHS. Being in the environmental health and safety industry for me validates my morals and ethics because I've always wanted to work or sell with products that amplify the human condition rather than just selling another cog. There's something wrong. I mean, we all have things, we all have watches and AirPods and iPhones, but I wanted to sell something that was actually going to help save people's lives or bring them home safely at the end of the day.
I love that. That's amazing. And I think that as time goes on, more and more people have this same initiative to be able to make an impact with their job. And I think that's awesome when you can find that and actually do that. So I love it. So Chris, the subject for today is account-based marketing, ABM. And as time goes on, I feel like this is picking up more momentum. You see all sorts of tools coming up that claim that they can do ABM for you, things of that nature. But really, can you give us a quick breakdown of what, in your opinion, is ABM? Why would a business lean that way? And how does that differ from different kinds of marketing that you might see in a business?
I think the biggest shift for professionals, especially for leaders, because we've always been trained that you need to have that MQL, that lead, that MQL, that SQL that turns into the opportunity. It's harder from an attribution standpoint of being able to track the ROI. I think you have to have a mindset shift that account-based marketing is influencing the prospect, the opportunity, maybe even the customer if you're doing some cross-selling, versus just getting them to take action through a CTA, fill out a form. As I like to say, what's the carrot that you're enticing the person to take action with? And it's that air cover. It's providing that content at the appropriate times that they're having conversations or researching. I think that's where intent data comes into play. But I think that's really the biggest thing is that it provides an additional level of detail of data to be able to even look at how the opportunity is flowing down the funnel, how they're engaging with ads and or, your website or some of your other channels that you're doing. But I think that's really the biggest shift in understanding ABM is that it's not a lead generation tool. It's purely an influencer. And then once you do that and you realize, okay, I need to measure different KPIs against this for success and not necessarily the conversion rate, cost of your CPL and everything along those lines.
I love it. So based off of that, how do you measure success? Just to dive into that right there, if it's front of mind, how do you look at success and failure? How do you measure it, justify it? What's that process look like for any business that's looking to maybe have better metrics or even start doing this?
I know for me, I've used two platforms in my experience with ABM. And it's not actually demand-based or Sixth Sense, but it was Terminus was the first one. And with Terminus, really the only way that we could show a positive influence on these opportunities is we measured deals that didn't have ads being shown, deals that did have ads being shown. And the only way we could really show that we were influencing them was we shrank the amount of days it took to close. So sales velocity was increased, and the amount of days was closed. With Enrich, who I've recently been flown to London to speak, on behalf of them to British business professionals. They are very easy because out of the box, especially we use HubSpot, and there are ways to get around it. Like if you use Salesforce, and having that bridge of maybe HubSpot or something else. But since it's a native integration with HubSpot, it's easy to show the influence based on the accounts the ads are being shown to. You can see the influence pipeline, the influence closed lost, the influence closed won. So those are just a couple of the KPIs that have been really easy for us as we can see like, okay, well, here's the influence pipeline and here's the influence closed won. We're already in the black, so let's just keep doing more of what we're doing. I think engagements. So instead of, Enrich calls it engagements, you could look at it as impressions or clicks or, you shouldn't measure clicks, but I think how Enrich has shown up or how it shows up its data is you can look at, well, how many times has the video been viewed? How many times is the article, the long form article that's kind of like in an iframe, how long has that been read? You could measure clicks, but I think you got to look at engagements and like have people resonated with that. Now, that's the thing that goes back to the equation. It's like, well, I'm not getting any engagements. Well, okay, is it the wrong ad copy? It's the wrong visual copy for the ads. Maybe it's the wrong videos. Okay, well, they're not staying on the page. They're not doing anything. Okay, well, maybe you're serving them up the wrong page. But then that also goes back to the original piece. I don't care if they come to our landing page. I only care if they see the ad and we stay top of mind. One of my mentors, Dave Tolliver, he and I discussed this about display ads in general with Google, display ads with ABM. Think of it as like a billboard. And you're going down the freeway at 70 miles per hour and you're seeing these billboards on a plumber and a dentist and another plumber. And you're like, well, I don't need a dentist or a plumber. But that one time that you're like, oh my gosh, I all of a sudden have a toothache and I need to go to the dentist. And like, I don't have a dentist, but I saw this billboard, so I'm going to go to it. So it's that air cover and that constant kind of reminding of folks from a brand awareness that we're there. And this is what we do.
I love that. So for the theme of this podcast, we obviously talk about content and how businesses can get more value out of their content. What role does content play in account-based marketing? And how do you look at that in general? And how can businesses maybe get some more mileage out of it?
I can speak to like what we've done. And we've aligned our campaign stages with what I like to call two kind of forks. You've got your intent campaigns and you've got your deal stage campaigns. And we've done one of two ways. One, we've done our due diligence of, okay, at each stage, what are people wanting to see? What are some of the things that they would want to look at to validate the fact of coming to look at us more, research us more, the evaluating, the awareness, decision, negotiating, et cetera, et cetera. So we matched our research with meeting with our executive vice president of like, okay, what are your reps saying at these different stages that we match the content that we already have in order to kind of fill those buckets. And so we built these campaigns, and based on, if it was evaluating, deciding, or negotiating, dropping these pieces of content that we'd already built in there. If we had holes, that told us we need to create that content, whether it's either video form, graphically, writing it out, creating solution briefs, et cetera, et cetera. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So personalization is kind of a hot topic when it comes to ABM and content and advertising and generative AI, all that fun. I just used about a dozen buzzwords, I feel like, in one question. But how do you look at the technologies and things like that in ABM, and where do you think they provide value, and what's maybe a little bit too much hype right now with all of the stuff going on, in your opinion?
I do wish that they had a capability like in Google Ads where you can have the dynamic keywords thrown into the headlines and into the verbiage, something similar to maybe with an ad campaign where your headline has and the company that you're targeting all of a sudden shoves in there. Well, it's not there. Because it does come down to, especially when it comes to ABM, you've got your one to many, one to few, one to one. And so 100% like one to one personalization, you really have to have their names listed out. Like here's the target specifically made for Chevron or Boeing or, whatever company you're targeting right there. I'm on the fence when it comes to highly personalized stuff, but I'm also a weird marketing pro where I kind of hate when things are extremely targeted to me, yet I'm on the other end of the stick where I'm doing it the same way. And so I try to build my ads. I'm like, okay, if I were floating around the internet and I know I was having these conversations, or maybe someone was targeting me, would I actually want these ads shown to me with like my company's logo? Would that actually pique my interest? It would probably pique my interest, but I'm not entirely sure that I would be on the phone and buy them right then, because you maybe aren't in the market. And I think that's where intent data, doing your due diligence, maybe being realistic of like a sales cycle, or like, are they even interested? Or even if they're aligned with your ICP, maybe sure, you're just assuming that because, we're heavy in manufacturing, they were just assuming because they're manufacturing, but it turns out like they wouldn't need our kind of stuff. Not the case.
I think it's an interesting perspective, because you're right. If I put myself in the shoes of one of my buyers and I were seeing advertising or materials online that had my name and my logo, I think I'd be more curious about how they're doing it and not as intrigued about who they are and what they do. Because you're right, 95% of the time, someone's not in market. And it is, how do I stay top of mind until they become the 5%? So I think that that's a really fascinating point, putting yourself, because eventually at some point in time, it feels like, do I not have any privacy anymore? I think personalization can really feel like it's encroaching on that. And I think that that's, definitely plays a role. So one final question, because these episodes go by really, really quickly. Intent data, you mentioned that a bunch. How are you using intent data with ABM? I feel like there's like Bombora is the source for everyone and anyone, but like, how are you using intent data in a productive way? Instead of, I don't know, I feel like there's a lot of buzzwords around intent data. How are you using it productively?
I think for sure it's definitely a prioritization scenario. There's so much data that's coming in that it's not one of those situations where it's a sure shot, like, oh, they're, in my case, they're searching for, an EHS platform. They could have used some kind of variation of a keyword or some kind of an intent spike that wasn't necessarily true. How we've been using it is we actually split it up into 3 swings where you've got 0 to 40, 41 to 70, and 71 to 100 with different messaging and different budgets thrown at it. Really, you want to go after the 0 to 40. They're just getting their toes dipping. They're barely looking. You're going to get in early in the conversations. Same thing with the 41 to 70, but they're a little more mature in their search, and maybe they also have an incumbent. The 71 to 100 is actually kind of a long shot. And if I were asked tomorrow, like, okay, well, what campaign would you cut immediately to save funds? That would be the one. Because if they're showing intent of that at that point, they've already made a decision, or they already have an incumbent, and maybe they're just doing their due diligence, which actually means they've already made a decision. And, one of the things, and this sounds rudimentary, but, setting up email notifications of like, your prospect visited the website, you should stop doing what you're doing and pick up a phone and call them and or email them right now because you're top of mind. So, one of the things is getting buy-in on the team as well. You could have these great processes and tech stack set up, but unless you've got the team drinking the Kool-Aid and seeing that it's working, which we've proven and people are getting more and more into it, then they're more willing to, lean into that intent data and use it as you're still hunting, but now you're in the right field with the right, projectile to hunt whatever you're hunting.
Love that. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Chris, we're out of time, but I really love this conversation. I think there's so much to ABM. So I think this is some great insights. If anyone wants to reach out and connect with you and further the conversation online, how and where can they find you?
Hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm a big proponent of mentoring and or sharing of information. Even if it's a competitor, I'm not going to show you under the hood, but I'm willing to have a conversation, because it's not necessarily me, spilling the beans, because there's a lot that goes into any of these equations from a marketing perspective. So yeah, hit me up on LinkedIn. Connect with me. Just promise not to sell me anything, and we can have conversations all day long.
Love it. Perfect. Well, Chris, again, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Ben. Awesome being here.
Thank you for listening to the Content Amplified podcast. Please subscribe and leave us a review. And for additional ways to get more out of your content, visit our website at getmasset.com. That's getmasset.com. And tune in next time to the Content Amplified podcast.